Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into something fascinating, a spiritual phenomenon that's been around for ages, but is still incredibly active across Northeast Africa. We're talking about the Zār spirit possession cult.
That's right. It's this whole complex world of beliefs and practices you find in places like Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia. And it shapes so much how people think about health, about social roles, especially for women, even today.
And we're drawing on some really rich material here, ethnographies, historical digging. We're going to look at, say, how Ethiopian Orthodox Christians in Addis approach healing, which is very specific, very contextualized.
And contrast that with the Zār cosmology in rural Sudan, in Hafriyat specifically. You see this amazing blend of, local histories, pre-Islamic ideas, all woven together.
So our goal here, our deep dive mission, is to unpack how these traditions frame illness, healing, the spirit world. And right away, you hit this fundamental question, this kind of paradox that really drives the whole thing.
It really does. It's the big question. What do you do with these spirits? Are they just evil? Intrusions linked to sin that need to be fought off, maybe violently exorcised, like you often see in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition?
Or are they something else? Are they these persistent forces you just have to deal with? Something you need to accommodate through these really elaborate, expensive rituals? Basically making a deal with them, which is more the Sudanese Zār approach.
Exactly. Expel or accommodate. That difference tells you so much about the underlying worldview, about how healing itself is constructed in these societies. It's not just about the rituals, it's about how they see the world.
Okay, so let's start with that Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church context. How do they even talk about being sick? The language itself seems important.
It really is. People use words like bishonkta or hmem. Now, we might just translate that as sickness or disease, but culturally, it's almost impossible to separate those terms from religious belief, from the idea of spiritual causes.
So bishifta isn't just, oh, I have a fever. It carries this extra layer, like maybe something's wrong spiritually or morally.
Often, yeah. It's quite common for people we see in the studies to lump everything under bishifta. Physical problems, sure, but also if you're struggling financially or if there's conflict in the family. And for many, the belief is quite direct. Evil spirits, oriscus menfes, they are the bishifta. They're not just the cause, they embody the illness.
Wow, okay, so the illness is the spirit. What lets that spirit in then? Is it just bad luck, or is there more to it? Seems like it starts with your relationship with God, maybe?
That's the primary explanation, rooted right in their theology. Illness often comes about because of God's, disregard, or more often, his permission. And why would God permit it? Because of sin.
So you need to address the sin first, penance.
Exactly. You need to know penance before you can really expect healing. And sin here is quite broad. It's not just obvious moral failings. It could be things like adopting modern lifestyles, dressing in Western clothes, using cosmetics, living too individually instead of focusing on the community and tradition. These things are seen as weakening your spiritual defenses, kind of opening the door.
It's like becoming modern is literally risky for your spiritual health. But it's not always about your own actions, right? Harm can come from outside, too. This Metet idea.
Right, Metet. That's about intentional harm, basically magic or sorcery. It's a huge source of anxiety. People often believe it's the cause of sudden illness, accidents, or even financial ruin, and the sources point fingers at specific people.
Like a traditional healer, a Aidenkai.
Yes, or sometimes, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable for people, a diptera.
The diptera, hang on, aren't they connected to the church? Like lay officials, musicians, scribes, people who know the sacred texts.
Precisely. They have access to this deep knowledge, the holy books, the spells, DGRMT. And there's this real fear, mentioned even by priests in the studies, that some individuals trained within the church use that knowledge maliciously to harm people, mentally or physically. The body is fundamentally seen as permeable. It's not sealed off. It's got openings, eyes, breasts, the navel, and spirits can potentially rush in through them. So the defense is all about regulation, about maintaining strict purity.
And the sources emphasize just how strict these practices are.
Oh, they are. We're talking about adhering very rigidly to Old Testament purity rules within the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. This means a lot of fasting, maybe up to 250 days a year. The idea is that fasting purifies the body, makes it tougher, less vulnerable.
And specific rules, too, like for women during menstruation.
Yes, absolutely. Women aren't permitted to enter a church or go to a holy water site during their period. It's all about controlling what enters and leaves the body, managing that permeability to keep the boundary between the sacred and the profane, or the healthy and the potentially invaded intact. Your body is this constant site of spiritual work.
That sounds like immense pressure. Being constantly responsible for maintaining that purity, fearing a lapse could let something harmful in.
It does create a sense of vulnerability, definitely. But here's the paradox. That same permeability, that openness, is also seen as the way you connect with the divine. If you keep the body spiritually clean, yes, you're defending against harm, but you're also making yourself receptive to blessings, to healing, to God's intervention. So the body is the battlefield, yes, but it's also the gateway.
Okay, let's shift focus now specifically to the Zār spirits. They seem central, whether people are trying to expel them or live with them. But where did this idea, this cult, even start? The origins seem murky.
Very murky and hotly debated among scholars. It reflects centuries of movement and cultural mixing across the region. One strong argument points to Ethiopia.
Why Ethiopia?
Well, the earliest written accounts we have of spirit possession activities, actually called Zār, come from Ethiopia. Plus, linguistically, there's a decent case that the word Zār itself might be an Amharic word borrowed into Arabic. So that suggests the concept of these specific spirits might have originated there, in the Horn of Africa.
But there's another theory, right? Focusing more on how the actual ritual, the cult structure, spread, maybe pointing towards the Middle East.
Exactly. This theory links the spread more to the slave trade. We have historical records showing the Zār cult becoming really widespread among enslaved people described as blacks, but also specifically brown or Ethiopian slaves, particularly in major centers like Egypt and Mecca.
So the structured communal practice might have developed or solidified in those diaspora contexts.
That's the idea. But it wasn't only slaves involved. Sources show local Egyptians participating right alongside slaves in these Zār ceremonies. And to complicate it even more, there's this Kigger text, we don't know exactly how old it is, suggesting Zār actually spread from Arabia back into Eritrea. So it's not a simple one-way street.
Okay, so it's complex. The idea of Zār spirits maybe has strong Ethiopian roots, but the organized cult might have spread and evolved through trade, slavery, migration across the Red Sea, and up the Nile.
That seems like a reasonable summary of the complexity, yeah. And understanding that movement helps us see where Zār fits in the bigger picture of spirits.
Right, the spirit hierarchy.
Yeah.
How do they fit in? Are they seen as demons?
It depends who you ask, but often, especially within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church clergy, there's a distinction. You have the really bad ones, Satan, Ganen, demons, who are seen as purely evil, just antagonists. Zār are often put in a slightly different category, sometimes called red jinn.
Red jinn, what does that signify? As opposed to...
Well, it suggests something a bit ambiguous. They're generally seen as less purely malevolent than the black jinn, the shayateen, which are considered outright evil. Zār are intrusive, disruptive, demanding. But the fact they demand things, that they want service, hints at a relationship that's more complex than just pure destruction. It's transactional. They're different from the white jinn, often associated with Muslim belief, which are typically seen as more benign or neutral, maybe even protective.
And what's really striking is how these Zār spirits seem to absorb identities, particularly foreign identities. They become these symbols of otherness, reflecting history.
Absolutely. They're almost like cultural mirrors, embodying groups that have interacted with the region over time. You see Habish spirits, for instance, that means Ethiopian.
What are they like?
Often demanding. They're frequently linked to problems with fertility or childbirth, reproductive grief. And in ceremonies, they often demand red clothing. Red, associated with blood, maybe danger, maybe vitality.
Then you get spirits reflecting more recent history, like the Kawaja spirits, representing Europeans or Westerners.
Yes, and these really show the anxieties around colonialism and modernization. The descriptions are vivid. These spirits are often portrayed as wealthy, demanding imported goods, Western clothes, sometimes speaking foreign languages during possession.
Like Mr. Prince.
Exactly, names like that. They might demand incredibly expensive ceremony suits, whiskey, cigarettes. Having a Kawaja Zār possess you becomes this way of externalizing the pressure and confusion that comes with Western influence in consumer culture. The demands for luxury goods put a huge strain on families.
Does this happen within Sudan, too? Do Zār reflect internal groups or local history?
Oh, definitely. You find Falada spirits representing Muslim groups from West Africa or Western Sudan who've migrated through. And some Zār are tied to very specific historical figures people still remember, like Muhammad Sadabuwan, who is linked to Mekhnimir, a famous leader from Shundi who actually fled to Ethiopia centuries ago. The Zār cult acts almost like a living archive, keeping these complex histories alive in ritual form.
But they're not all high-status foreigners or historical figures. You mentioned some others, like Jada and Ranil.
Right, and they're fascinating because they represent something else entirely. They're described as prostitutes. So they embody transgression, the inversion of the ideal, fertile, moral woman, yet sometimes they appear demanding local wedding clothes. They represent moral ambiguity, yet they're part of the system. It just shows how these spirits become this running commentary on everything: power, money, morality, foreignness, the confusion of change.
So let's get into the actual practices. This core difference, kicking the spirits out versus learning to live with them, plays out dramatically on the ground. Let's start back in Ethiopia with the Orthodox approach. The holy water sites, the Abul Bota, seem key.
They are absolutely central. These sites are built around springs or water sources believed to be consecrated holy. They're places people go for prayer, for veneration, and very specifically for cure. The space itself feels sacred, but interestingly, the boundaries aren't always sharply defined. It's porous. People come and go. It shows how the sacred isn't just locked inside a church. It permeates the landscape.
And it's not just about faith or prayer in the abstract. Material things play a huge role in the healing, don't they?
Materiality is crucial. Obviously, the water itself, the abul, is primary. But other things become powerful agents too. Consecrated books like the Darsena Mikael, Homilies of St. Michael. People value these books immensely. Maybe not even for reading the text, many lay people haven't,
Right.
but for the physical protection the book itself offers against spirits.
Like an amulet.
In a way, yes. The cross is essential, always used. And even modern things get pulled in. The sources mention people bringing their cars a huge investment, but also dangerous with high accident rates to the Abel Bota to be sprinkled with holy water for protection. These objects aren't passive symbols. They're seen as active participants in creating safety, in reinforcing that permeable body against intrusion.
But the actual process of getting the spirit out, the exorcism, sounds like it can be quite forceful.
It can be incredibly dramatic, very physical, and honestly quite confronting for an outsider to witness. The aim is expulsion, forcing the spirit out, and the methods reflect that. We have detailed accounts in the sources.
Can you give an example?
One observation involved a teenage girl. She was physically held down, even tied with church candles. Then she was held over burning incense while covered with a thick blanket. It's deliberately creating an environment that's suffocating, claustrophobic, intensely uncomfortable. The idea is to make it unbearable for the spirit inside her.
Wow. Any others?
Another case described a man who was actually chained to a tree at one of these healing sites.
Chained. Why?
The rationale you hear is that when the person reacts violently, shouting, cursing, fighting back, that's not them, that's the spirit reacting. It's reacting to the holiness of the place, the water, the cross. So the resistance is taken as proof that the spirit is real and that the treatment is working. It justifies the force being used.
So the struggling actually confirms the diagnosis, in their view.
Yeah. Exactly. It's seen as confirmation of possession and the power of the sacred objects. The local understanding is often that the human host doesn't really feel the harsh treatment, only the spirit does. And the ultimate goal is often for the body to expel something physical people talk about, vomiting up a snake or a stone, some kind of material poison the spirit put there. That expulsion is the final proof of cure.
Is everyone okay with this level of force, though? Even within that Ethiopian context?
No, there's definitely debate. The sources show differing views. Many people, including some clergy, argue the force is necessary because the spirits are stubborn, they fight back. But others, including other priests and community members, find it troubling. They might see it as unnecessary, even abusive, or maybe not in line with the compassionate healing they associate with Christ. So there's an internal tension there about how far is too far.
Okay, now let's shift context dramatically. Let's go to Sudan, to Hafriyat, where the whole philosophy seems to flip. It's not about expulsion, but accommodation.
That's the fundamental difference, especially among the women who are often the main practitioners and patients in the Zār cult there. Their core belief, quite strongly held, is that Zār spirits, once they attach to you, simply cannot be removed. You can't exorcise them. They become a lifelong reality you have to manage.
That's a direct challenge to the male, maybe more orthodox religious view that says all spirits can be kicked out.
It is. It's a very different understanding of spiritual affliction. It implies acceptance, a need to negotiate a long-term, often difficult relationship with this intrusive force.
And the ceremonies to manage this relationship, they must be quite something, especially if these spirits are demanding foreigners.
They are incredibly elaborate and very, very expensive. They usually last an odd number of days, 1, 3, 5, maybe 7. It involves intense rhythmic drumming, chanting, and people dancing, often into a state of trance. This can go on for hours until the spirit finally descends, makes its presence known, and reveals its identity and, crucially, its demands.
And the person possessed takes on a special role.
Yes, the patient becomes the Zār's bride, the Aries. During the main ritual period, she's kept in seclusion, treated almost like a virgin bride preparing for marriage. It's highly ritualized.
And the demands dictate the performance. You mentioned clothing changes.
Absolutely. The whole ceremony revolves around meeting the spirit's demands. The patient might have to change clothes multiple times. If it's Sidi Kudara, who's seen as the spirit daughter of a holy man Zār, she'll need green clothes. If it's a wealthy Khawaja spirit, like our Mr. Prince, it might demand expensive suits, imported fabrics, specific jewelry. This performance makes the spirit's presence very real, very public. It solidifies the identity of the possessing spirit and the status of the afflicted person.
And how is the deal finally sealed? If not by expulsion, then what? You mentioned sacrifice.
Oh. The climax, the thing that really establishes the long-term covenant, is a blood sacrifice. An animal, usually a sheep or goat, is chosen very carefully. Its color and type have to match the spirit's known preferences, like a reddish animal, for those Ethiopian Habish spirits, connecting back to their association with blood and fertility issues.
How is the animal prepared?
It's treated almost like a bride itself. It's washed, decorated with henna, sometimes draped with a garmosis, the traditional bridal face veil. Then, during the ritual climax, the Zār spirit, acting through the possessed person, is understood to drink the animal's blood and eat some of its flesh. This act seals the pact. It's the final step in establishing this permanent, demanding, and costly relationship.
Now, it's impossible to talk about Zār, especially in Hofriat, without talking about gender. The sources say it's overwhelmingly married women who are possessed something like 40 to 50%. Why them? Why not unmarried women or men as much?
It's striking, isn't it? The unwed seem largely immune. The local explanation, which you hear mostly from men in the sources, often comes down to this idea of women's supposed inherent nature. They're seen as possessing qualities, heat, fluidity, interiority that make their bodies naturally more, well, permeable, more susceptible to spirit intrusion.
And there's this idea about moral strength. Egli.
Yes. The male view often suggests women lack sufficient egel, this kind of moral fortitude or reason, needed to effectively ward off spirits. So from that perspective, getting possessed, while not desirable, is almost seen as a natural hazard of being female.
But that sounds like it completely sidelines the women themselves, who are the ones actually running these ceremonies and living with the spirits. Do the sources offer a different perspective? Maybe from the women? Does this egel idea get challenged?
Well, the practice itself sort of subverts it. While the dominant male narrative might frame it as weakness, look at what the spirits are actually doing. They are almost always interfering with women's reproductive health. The spirits are said to seize or hold the womb. They're blamed for infertility, miscarriages, problems with menstruation like amenorrhea, and the Zār ritual itself is full of symbols related to femininity and fertility, the blood sacrifice, the patient as a bride, the garmosis veil, the specific colors demanded.
So the affliction directly targets what's seen as a woman's primary social role, having children.
Exactly. And this ties back to the permeability idea, too. Some male interpretations suggest menstrual blood itself signifies a breach in the body's boundary, making women particularly vulnerable during that time. But the Zār cult takes this perceived vulnerability and turns it into something else, a different kind of power.
Which brings us to this really interesting idea of Zār as kind of metacultural space, like an anti-society. What does that mean? What does it let women do?
It's like stepping outside the normal rules. The Zār possession allows the woman, temporarily, to see her everyday life, her constraints from a distance, from without. Within the Zār world, the normal, often strict rules of village life get bent, played with, reevaluated.
And the spirits themselves facilitate this, because they are other.
Precisely. Zār spirits are often foreigners, or maybe transgressors like prostitutes. They aren't bound by local morality. This allows them to become a kind of cultural safety valve.
How does that work practically? If a woman is having problems in her marriage, maybe her husband isn't supporting her, or there's just too much stress?
Instead of confronting her husband directly, which might break the social harmony, the problem gets blamed on the Zār spirit. The spirit is demanding things, maybe expensive food, new clothes, jewelry, a costly ceremony. It's a way to articulate needs, frustrations, complaints, but the fault lies externally, with this demanding spirit.
So the husband isn't failing his wife. He's appeasing a powerful, disruptive Zār. It's a way to negotiate without causing direct conflict within the family or community.
Exactly. It's a formalized, ritualized complaint mechanism. It preserves the surface harmony, which is incredibly important in these communities, by shifting the source of the trouble outside the immediate social relationships.
It sounds like a very clever, if difficult, way to navigate a system where women might not have much direct power. It's like strategic compliance.
That's a great way to put it. By accepting the role of the possessed Zār host, the woman gains this unique platform. She can make demands, command resources, get attention, all in the name of satisfying the spirit, but the benefits often flow directly to her. It's leveraging affliction for social and material gain within the bounds of what's acceptable.
There's a local myth mentioned, Fatna the Beautiful. How does that connect?
The Fatna myth is really telling about the trajectory of a woman's life in Hofriat, as described in the sources. Fatna magically emerges young and beautiful from the wrinkled skin of an old man. It's a total reversal of aging. In reality, a woman starts as a young, perhaps virginal bride, and over time, through marriage, childbirth, and aging, she gains a different kind of power. She becomes elderly, respected, almost man-like in her ability to command implicitly, to manage households, maybe even metaphorically herd younger women, or symbolic things like pigeons.
So the possessed woman, like Fatna in reverse, is playing a long game. She has to submit to the spirit's demands.
She has to sometimes lose to the spirit, accept the affliction, play the role.
In order to ultimately win, to get her needs met, maybe stabilize her fertility through the ritual, gain status, and exert influence indirectly.
That's the paradox. It's only by embracing the possession, by submitting to the Zār, that she activates this negotiating power. Overt power might belong to men, but women, particularly married women afflicted by Zār, develop this subtle, implicit power, manipulating the social and economic flows through the demands of their spirits. It's a constant dance between seeming victimhood and exercising real agency.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive has shown us these two really distinct ways of thinking about and dealing with spirit affliction in Northeast Africa. Two cultural architectures for healing, really.
Yeah, on one side you have the Ethiopian Orthodox model. It emphasizes moral purity, sees the spirit as the illness linked to sin. The solution is forceful expulsion, using powerful sacred objects and water, demanding penance and purification.
And then the Sudanese Zār cult, especially as practiced by women in Hofriat. Here, the spirits are seen as permanent residents. You can't kick them out, so you have to accommodate them through these elaborate, ongoing ritual negotiations. It becomes this space for managing social tensions, for women to assert needs indirectly.
What really comes through from both contexts is that health and illness are never just about biology. They are deeply tangled up with faith, with community relationships, with history, and with this constant back and forth between people, spirits, and even objects. It's all connected.
And that leaves us with a really interesting final thought, circling back to that Ethiopian idea of waga. Could you remind us what that means?
Waga is a complex word. It means cost or price, but also reward. In the Orthodox context, if someone endures suffering, illness, misfortune, but does so with patience, piety, humility, that suffering itself generates waga. It becomes a kind of spiritual merit, a credit that helps ensure salvation.
So if suffering itself can be reframed as an opportunity, a way to draw closer to God, to earn this spiritual reward, turning misfortune into a kind of ultimate advantage,
then maybe what healing means gets fundamentally shifted. Maybe it's not always about just getting rid of symptoms. Maybe sometimes it's about successfully navigating the suffering itself, transforming it into something spiritually valuable, achieving a different kind of long-term success.
a really powerful idea to mull over. Does healing mean elimination, or does it sometimes mean transformation?
Definitely something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex world of Zār spirits and healing in Northeast Africa. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning into Sonara's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.